Welcome to our next breakout session, the 4-day Workweek, What It Really Takes. Here to moderate is Lattice's Vice President of People, Sophie Hurcombe.
Welcome, everyone. Thanks for joining us. I love this topic, and I'm so glad you're all joining us here. We're competing with DEIB, which is like a tough thing to compete with.
Yes, it is.
Goodness. So thanks for joining us. Quick reminder, we are taking questions, and we'll have space for Q&A, and so we have a Slido that you can access. So I think it should be up on the screen at some point. But we'll have a QR code, and just join at slido.com, and we'll have the code there, and then you can add your questions, and we'll answer those at the end. But let me start by sharing who I am. I lead the people team at Lattice. I'm super excited to be here today with all of you. So many incredible people, leaders here who care deeply about their companies. And so thanks for joining this conversation. But let me hand it over to my wonderful panelists here, Ariane and Natalie, to introduce themselves. Would you like to go first?
Yeah. Hi, everybody. I'm Ariane. I'm a VP of People and Culture at Connect&Go. What we do is a revenue management software for attraction parks. So our customers are park operators from theme parks, zoos, aquariums, things like that. We are a Montreal, Canadian-based company, and we're a size of 60 today. We do have people remote in the US and in Europe as well. We actually launched our pilot phase back in 2021 of the 4-day Workweek and officially made it permanent back in 2022.
Hi, everybody. My name's Natalie Breece. I'm the Chief People and Diversity Officer at thredUP. If you aren't familiar with thredUP, we are one of one of the world's largest online consignment shops for women and kids apparel. I've been at thredUP for almost 9 years now. Really, as long as we've had a people function, I have been on the people team. We have around 2,500 employees. That's a mix of our salaried workforce and our hourly workforce in our distribution centers. And we introduced the 4-day Workweek as a pilot in 2020, full execution of that in 2021.
Incredible. I can't wait to hear a little bit more detail from both of you. So let's kick off with our first question. What inspired your company to explore a 4-day Workweek in the first place? Was it about productivity or well-being, innovation, or something entirely different?
Yeah, so at first my CEO came to me, and he likes innovative and flashy things. So he comes to me and he says, have you seen what's going on in Europe? This was like early 2021. There's this big movement on the 4-day Workweek. And I said, yeah, it looks really interesting. So he gives me in my hands and says, okay, let's work on something and see if it's something that we can test out at Connect&Go. And went back to my executive team. So keep in mind this why we were doing it was kind of putting in motion as I was working on it. And then my executive team looks at me, are you serious? We're not doing that. We're in a hyper growth mode. We need to get shit done. We need to really make sure that we're evolving and really on that fast track, and reducing hours won't work. So that's a little bit where the shift of the mindset had to happen. It was about measuring outcomes, not hours, looking at accountability, autonomy, and seeing how we can also evolve the foundation of our culture. And took some time to settle in, and then afterwards, at a certain point when we were looking at really a data perspective of what that would look like, we were reducing 20% of our hours to increase 20% of our productivity, and that's what really hit the nail in terms of our why and making sure that we can really focus on those outcomes.
Incredible. Natalie?
Yeah, so for us, it was kind of mid to late 2020 where we all thought we were going to work from home for 2 weeks from the pandemic, and then we're like, okay, this is really going to be longer than we thought. And I was meeting with our CEO, and we were starting to think about what is it going to look like when we return to work? Or we're going back to the office? What are the considerations we're going to have to make? And part of that conversation was there's some things that we've actually learned that we really appreciate about being at home. And we were hearing it from our employees. I was seeing it in the news. People started to value things like quality of life and time and dinners at home and things like that because they had the chance to really kind of enjoy that during the pandemic. And so he was like, we need to get our team together and we need to start talking about what is it going to look like when we go back. And so we got the team together and we talked about we actually whiteboarded with a bunch of Post-it notes, what are the things you've loved about being at home? And what are the things that you miss about being in the office? And we had this really robust conversation around this is what we like, this is what we don't. And we walked out of that conversation, and I like absorbed everything, and I came back to him and I was like, I have a really harebrained idea. You're probably going to tell me to be quiet, but I'm going to say it anyways. I think we should consider a 4-day work week. And he was like, what? And I was like, I really like, I'm blurting it out right now. I'm going to come back to you with like a proposal, but I think we should consider it. And he's like, well, it's not a no. I just want to see, I want you to put a business plan together. And then the rest was history.
That's incredible. I love that. I'm going to go and suggest that tomorrow. I'd love to understand, Natalie, like how did your company approach designing a 4-day work week that worked across the different teams and roles? I mean, you've probably got a mix of salaried, hourly, all those sorts of folks. And so I want to make sure your frontline employees, what did that look like?
Yeah, so for us, just in general at thredUP, we tend to really take like a first principles approach to everything we do. And so the fundamental question was, why do we think we should make a change here? And it started with like, okay, so here's all the things that we've been taught to believe around work. It's been, we looked up before this, in 1926 is when we started the 5-day work week. So fast forward in 2020, 2021, okay, almost 100 years where we've just accepted that we needed 5 days to get our jobs done. And so it was like, okay, like let's question all the things that we do, and like why is it that we believe it requires 5 days to get your job done, and start with that fundamental belief. But then the other thing for me is like I am pretty relentless about like not wanting to introduce anything that cannot be also equitable to our DC workers, our distribution center team members. So that was the biggest hurdle, was like we feel like we could probably find a path to do this in the corporate offices or folks that are working remote. A lot different when you have people we have 24/7 facilities. And so for me it was like, okay, so what we're going back to first principles, what are we trying to do? We're trying to give people more time in their life to focus on the things that they're passionate about. That's what we want to do, full stop. We want, if you invest in your passions outside of work, I believe you're going to do better work. So how do you then create that also for the hourly workforce? And then we kind of backed into, how do we do something similar for them?
Ariane?
Yeah, and for us, while we don't have all that complexity and beautiful logistics that Natalie had to go through, we were really small at the time, so the momentum was interesting. And the first thing that we were looking at and designing is we wanted to tend to the 80, 100, 100 model, where you're working 80% of the time for 100% of pay and 100% of the productivity, but looking at a Monday to Thursday 32-hour work week. So we weren't necessarily looking at compressing the hours. But one thing that was really top of mind was it needed to be fair across the board. And the other thing was that we could not impact our customers in this change. We are in the attraction industry, so you can assume and imagine that most of our customers, their high season peaks, they're working Fridays, weekends are huge. So we needed to make sure that we had full coverage. And so the biggest investment that we did do when we were navigating this test trial was to ensure that even if we're going to do things and test them out, they might work, they might not work, we needed to invest a little bit more in our customer support and add on some hires to make sure that we can have rotation schedules. So we'll have team members who'll work on the Friday, but they'll have those same conditions on the 32-hour work week.
That's so impactful and important. We don't want to impact our customers negatively, but finding a solution is really important as well, and it sounds like you were able to nail that. Ariane, I know you've spoken about transparency and high trust like as foundations for the shift that you made. Can you share how you brought your employees along on this journey and maintained that trust as you scaled the program?
Yes. So transparency was super fundamental for us. What we actually did when we were also designing is as an exec team, we went through kind of a framework, what we wanted to look like, how we thought it would be, but we also put a lot of ownership in the hands of our teams. So we had announced to our teams 3 months ahead of time that we were going through a pilot phase from September to December. This is back in 2021. And that we were going to kind of win or lose together. Like we were putting a lot of ownership on collective solutions to make sure that we can look at efficiencies across the board. And so that transparency that we had with our team from the beginning of saying, hey, like this is something we're going to do together. You have full ownership on your time management. Where we did invest a lot was, making sure that our team was trained on productivity, time management, but also making sure that from a process perspective, they were helping us look at the gaps that would help us get more productive at the end of the day. And During our pilot phase, we were so transparent that we would put what we determined what success looked like as KPIs and metrics in our team's face every single week. And so our team actually saw what moves the needle to moving this initiative permanently. And I think that like going back and thinking about it now, it was kind of bold, but at the same time, I think that's what made all the impact.
Great. Natalie, would you like to add?
I would say similar to what Ariane said. Like for us, a big part of it was like we are going to win or lose as a team. This is either going to work or not work based on how we as a team embrace it. And part of that was when we originally, like we set out to do this, going to the team and saying, this is something we're thinking about. We want to try this. What excites you about this? What scares you about this? And like taking that input and then putting together trainings and discussions and roundtables around those things. Like the biggest thing that came up for our team, everybody's excited, like, I don't know what I'm going to do with all that extra time. So there was all that excitement. But the other side of it was, I don't know how in the hell I'm going to do all these meetings in 4 days. So it was like, we have to figure out a way to change how we structure our time. And that became abundantly clear. Like, you cannot do the same amount of meetings in 4 days. So how do you then scrutinize what meetings you should have, what you shouldn't? Are there ways you should be communicating different? Should there be more async communication than live communication? So like all of those things, and we kind of package that up as these trainings that we would do to help people kind of flush that out, have conversations about it. And then as checkpoints went on, like people that were doing it really well, then having them talk about what was working for them. The other thing to keep that going is every year we do what we call meeting defragmentation, which is like at the start of the year, cancel them all. And then add back the meetings that are needed. Because you realize real quick that there's a lot of stuff on your calendar that you actually don't need to have on your calendar. And it gives you like a nice cleanse to start over.
That's so important. It sounds like a really good tool in actually like efficiency and like driving forward, and like I think we could all do with less meetings. I love that you talk about like it's not trying to cram 5 days into 4, it's making sure we're really effective with what we're actually driving. Mm-hmm. How did you measure success? What results or signals from managers or leadership proved that the change was actually working? Ariane?
Yeah, so for us, it was also about having leaders have that productivity mindset at first, so they can also work in the same direction as us. But measuring success was really about making sure that our customers weren't impacted, our product features weren't impacted in their deliveries and our commitments. So a lot went through that. And I think at the end of the day, like when we decided to say, yes, this is successful, there was so much going on from seeing people shift, being kind of like a little bit entrepreneurs in the business. And we were very small at that time, so keep that in mind. But I think that that's where we saw a lot of that shift. And having people implicated in the solutions, it did help us get that success. But we had very dedicated specific metrics that helped us move the needle as well. Mm-hmm.
We have kind of 3 core sets of metrics that we evaluate. One is like, how is it helping on the front end with talent? And like, are you bringing in the right people? Is it being cited as a reason people join us? But then is that like, from a talent density perspective, like the right caliber of talent? Then is it being cited as something as when we do our engagement surveys in Lattice, like in EMPS, or the reasons why what are the things that people believe are like really special about the culture at thredUP? Is it something that comes up? And are we retaining exceptional talent as a result of it? And then on the other side of that is like, are we still delivering for the customer? Because just like you, like ultimately the business can't suffer, the customer can't suffer as a result of this. And so are we still delivering for our customer and our shareholders on the business results that we've promised?
Yeah. What are some of the unexpected challenges you encountered, whether logistical, cultural, or performance related, and how did you address them? Natalie, let's start with you.
Yeah, so there's like kind of 2, I would say, like main challenges that come to mind for this. The first was we didn't really think about what happens when there's a 3-day weekend. So like if you already have a Monday off for Memorial Day and you're off on Friday, now it's a 4-day weekend. And I don't know about you, but when I have 4 days off, I'm like in full vacation mode at the end of that. And like, it then like takes time to get like reassembled. So we were like, this isn't gonna work. We have to figure out a different plan for that. So what we did is, and because you also don't want a bunch of 3-day weeks, because if you're already trying to get everything done in 4 days, and now you're trying to get it done in 3 days, it'll make your head spin. So we changed it so that if there's a Monday holiday, you work the following Friday. So that way it maintains consistent 4 days all the time. That was one thing that, and not everybody loved it, but it was like, this is the way that we can maintain this. I'm about like, how do we maintain this for the long haul? And that's the only way we're gonna be able to do it. The other is I started to question whether or not it was leading to attracting the wrong type of talent. Like, frankly, because we're among friends, like the people that don't want to work that hard. And they're like, great, I can get full pay and I can work 32 hours a week. And it's like, that's actually not what like we're gonna expect the same results out of you. So for some people, 4 days is hard. The way I like to explain it is, it's like if you were doing like a high intensity interval training, you work very hard for those 4 days to earn the 3 days of recovery. So like we explain that to people because and we've changed over time how we've explained the schedule, because you want people that are like high achieving, not just those that are looking for like the easy way out.
Very similar challenges. We actually went through 2 federal holidays during our pilot period, so that kind of helped me say, okay, yeah, that was not on my radar. But yeah, so we did the exact same thing. So for us, 4-day work week, no matter what, and so we have these schedules when we do have holidays. Conversion of vacation days was a little logistics that, you're actually adding more vacation if you're on a day. 3 weeks equals 15 days, and so you have to convert that out to the number of days that it's equivalent in a 4-day work week. Same thing on hiring. We actually did something very interesting because we were definitely, and keep in mind, you're probably in the same time period where war on talent was actually crazy. We actually scaled back announcing the 4-day work week publicly. So we were receiving so many resumes, people who wanted to work, and it was really hard to kind of scope out a little bit the mindset of these candidates that we were hiring, that we were actually interviewing. So we took it off our website, we took it off our job description, we went through all their process of recruitment to make sure that it was really on accountability, autonomy, making sure that we had high ownership mindsets. And then we actually would talk about what that actually meant in play in our final stages of the interview. So we did that for about a year, and then the economy and the market changes a bit, so we put that back out there. But it was definitely a huge learning curve. One thing that I did not foresee is that we actually created a concept where, a little bit like Natalie, that we have an overflow and overwork. Because I think that we had some people in our company that they had the mindset that they were going to work 4-day work week and that nothing was going to happen on the Friday. And so before launching it permanently, I talked about overflow. So, right, it's like any type of person who wants to actually prepare their week ahead of time. You do that on Sunday or on the weekend. It's the same thing for the Friday. And that helped us also explain to why people were actually sometimes connected on the Friday in itself. But at the same time, also to make sure to be careful about overworking, because it is a sprint and it can be very intense to work on a 4-day work week, and it's about working smart, not hard, and making sure you're challenging the right things on efficiency. And so I thought, okay, I launched the concept, makes sense, everybody's on board. And it took some time to actually settle in. So that was a huge also learning curve, that when you're shifting an organization, whether your 2,000 employees are 25 or 60, it takes some time to actually see and feel it and live it, because we started to have comments, oh yeah, there's people connected on Fridays, it's making pressure, should I be working? And so today we don't even hear that anymore, but it took some time to settle in.
Yeah, that's incredible. And I feel like the story around talent density and making sure we're continuing to raise the bar and attracting the right talent, and then also making sure they know how that works. It takes change management throughout. One thing I would love to understand a little bit about is, Natalie, like, how do you ensure that a 4-day work week doesn't unintentionally create inequities? So I want to make sure it's not widening the gaps of existing ones either, or maybe that's access, workload, or different recognition as well.
Yeah, it's a great question, because it's one of, especially for us, when you have these 2 very distinct workforces, of like, you want to make sure it doesn't feel like it's a real benefit to one group and not the other. And I think for it, like, back to like the why and the fundamental reason why we're doing it is we want to give people more flexibility and to invest in the things that matter to them. So for us, it might look a little, so on the corporate side, it's a Monday through Thursday, Fridays off. In the distribution centers, it is more of like you can choose. You work 4 days, or actually some work 3 days. And they're willing to work a 12-hour schedule. Some actually choose to work 5. There's not very many, but most, they have that option. And then we just have to make sure we have coverage for all shifts. So it's like that. It's like the feeling of choice that I think is super important, and autonomy to make those decisions. But what we've also seen has been really, like, these are the stories that are super heartwarming for me, is that we've actually seen it in the home create more equity. Like whether maybe you have 2 parents who are both, like, they're sharing the caregiving responsibilities. One can then pick that up on Friday, which then, like, it either reduces the cost of childcare or makes the other person feel like they have time. So I'll give an example. Our Chief Product and Technology Officer, his wife's a stay-at-home mom. On Fridays, he takes care of their children, and she gets that day to go do things for herself. So it created it created balance in their home that he's actually said to me, he's like, I would rather have this 4-day work week than get a raise. Like, it matters that much more to me. Or we have another person on our team who has a child who has some special needs and needs to go to occupational therapy, and like can do that on Friday when she's the breadwinner. Traditionally, it was like her spouse who was taking that time on Friday. So it actually has created like a lot of equity in the home front.
I love that.
Yeah, those are great examples, and we've seen similar things as well. And also, what maybe I'm not talking about diversity, but the well-being aspect of having that time to take care of yourself when you have family obligations. That's what we've seen a lot shifted. But I do think it creates a big quality of life that it would be hard to go back.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, that's huge. What do they say? Like, if you need to get something done, ask a parent, right? Like, they know how to like get it done in a short amount of time.
Yes.
Last question, and then we'll move over to the questions that we have. Reminder, Slido questions, add them in. We want to talk through it. What's one mindset shift you think is essential for any people leader considering a 4-day work week?
I mean, I think you have to be very, very rooted in the why. Because there will be moments that it feels, this will come up if you try to introduce something like this, where we both kind of talked and chuckled about, like, when things get tough, it's one of the first things that comes up of like, maybe we shouldn't have a 4-day work week anymore. But if you're really grounded in the why, like, why did we choose to do this to begin with? And you're like, we chose to do this because we believe fundamentally people will be better employees, more productive employees, if they are given more time to do other things that matter to them. That has not changed. And so, or if it has, let's talk about it. But most of the time it has not. And it's more about, there's something else that's causing us to question this. Is it not working? Like, aren't people not working enough? Like, what are those other factors? But if you feel really like grounded in the why, it's easier to kind of get through the ebbs and flows.
Absolutely. And I feel like a broken record, but ownership mindset needs to be number one. That's what we've seen and experienced. In a 4-day work week, we don't have time to be behind you and kind of say, hey, did you work on your deliverables? Are you ready to actually do your presentation, or you do your project, or that customer presentation? And so it really takes high ownership individuals who are feel passionate about what they want to deliver, but also make sure that they have that kind of ingrained a little bit, if you will. Mm-hmm. And so it helps a lot to have those first steps of shifting your culture towards, that ownership mindset. And at the end of the day, we're all adults in the room, and we're all adults in our companies. And I think that giving that perk of having better quality of life, it's also to be taken in a certain regard where you're going to have that sprint coming in the next 4 days. So yeah.
You wouldn't believe too, I bet for you, but like there's been times where I will be like, we've got a lot of work to do, and the last thing we want to do is like have to like lose our 4-day work week because we're not like protecting it. And people like immediately like they chafen right up. They're like, I don't want that at risk. And so it is something I think collectively from an owner's perspective, like people really feel like it is theirs to lose.
So I can tell you, if I have a quick time, I can tell you I would say, call it a mistake that we made. This was last year. We were going through a little bit of technical issues with our product, and it was high critical season for our customers. And we've always put in our 4-day work week, we have a guidebook on the why and what the expectations are. And we had always said that if ever we're in a critical period and we actually need to pull back on the 4-day work week, we can activate the 5-day work week for a set specific amount of time. And I think it was a high pressure moment, and we actually said, okay, we're going to go for 4 weeks during the high critical period, and we're going to go back to five days a week. It's probably the biggest mistake I've ever said yes to, because our team was so frustrated with us, and they told us, if you just came to us and said, we need to work harder, we need to make sure to roll up our sleeves and get this over with, we'll do it, regardless of what that looks like. And so that was a huge learning, because that's when you also can actually validate that you're not counting hours, you're counting outputs and contributions.
I love that about ownership and just really making sure your teams are a part of it. This is what we need to solve. They'll all get to work. They're motivated to make sure it happens in those 4 days.
Yeah.
I love that. So let's move to the questions, because we have some questions in the room. The first one we've got is, how hard did you have to work to get your board to agree to this?
You want to take that? You want me to take?
Well, we didn't go to our board. We kind of did it sneakily, but
Ask for forgiveness, not permission.
yes, exactly.
Nice.
We did not ask for permission either. We kind of introduced it, and we said we're doing this as a pilot, and we're excited to share with you what the results are. And they were supportive. There have been times though where they've been like, are you sure this is the right thing to do? And that's where I also go back to then the why. This is what we know about our culture, and this is why we're doing it. And they generally are like, okay, we get it. But it's such a foreign concept to a lot of people that they're like, I just don't get how that works in practice.
Yeah, and a lot of board meetings are results driven, right? So you're putting the results up in front of their eyes, and they're not necessarily looking at how it's actually being done. So we definitely we got some questions and surprises when we saw our employees started to actually announce that we were doing 4-day work week on LinkedIn. So not the best approach, but definitely I think that it goes back to having that why that's strong and anchored in your results.
Thank you both for sharing. Our next question is, they're moving around. You mentioned that you work 20% less to gain 20% productivity. What did you measure to assess the additional productivity?
Great questions. So we were looking at, so we have a product that has delivery, onboarding, product features. So we had all our exec team members have 3 to 4 KPIs for their business. And those are the KPIs that we were also measuring prior to heading into the 4-day work week. So we did have also a benchmark of base. For example, you mentioned a lot of KPIs on attraction, retention, and stuff like that. So we had this board that had about probably way too many KPIs, but it was about 25 KPIs, and some were cross-functional, and we were really aiming at looking what moves the needle on that cross-functional. And then, when you look at productivity, there is a big piece that is also perception-based sometimes, because you are saying, do I feel like I actually accomplished everything in my week? But that, from a measure perspective, we were looking at product delivery, we were looking at customer satisfaction, NPS, and all that stuff. So very business-driven. Yeah. Does that answer?
Yeah. Next one we've got is, how did implementing this impact your time off policies? Could you track an increase or decrease in PTO or sick time use?
We decreased PTO. But when you look at a logistic perspective, we were 3 weeks, 15 days, and we decreased to 12 days. So you're not impacting the week per se, but in number of days we had to decrease.
We have a flexible PTO policy, so it's essentially unlimited PTO. What I saw is actually fewer requests for PTO. Mm-hmm. I think because if you're going to have that third day off, that was sufficient in some cases. And I still want people to take time off. It's not about that. I think you need to take the time when you need it or want it. But I think it felt like you were getting more recovery time, so we saw fewer requests.
Yeah, and I mean, I know myself, I often take like a long weekend, and so
Yeah.
like those long weekend days are probably different, but people still need that week off to recharge and reset as well. Love that. What did you integrate in your interview process to screen out candidates that were mainly interested in the 4-day schedule? I'm guessing like that talent density question. Yeah.
I have not really changed anything in the interview process, but I do listen for certain things. So like if we ask a candidate, like, so tell us what you've learned about thredUP and what makes you excited to work for us. If one of the first things they say is the 4-day work week, I'm like, not the right answer. Like you should say that like later on. But it's, and a lot of times people will say it like once they go through onboarding, like that was one of those things that was like, I was between these two companies and you had the 4-day work week, so I decided to go, which is fine. But like that should not be the first reason. I'm looking for people that are like passionate about our mission. They care about what we're doing. They understand what we're doing, and they're asking like thoughtful business questions. And so it's really more like their answers than my questions.
Similar, but we went through a process where we wanted to make sure we were actually measuring ownership. So, and we were also at a stage where we were maturing a lot of our processes and people, given that we were growing. But it helped us really make sure that our interview process was more behavioral based on examples and making sure we have a set specific competencies. Some was humility, some was solution driven, growth driven, and definitely people who come up to us and say, hey, like this 4-day work week, I want to come work with you. It also is not the right answer that we're looking for, but it's helped us be more mature in our process. We also have more stakeholders involved while we have not lengthened, and all our leadership roles go through psychometrics to make sure that we also have high accountability in our leaders.
Great insights. Do you find that people work longer hours during those 4 days versus producing the same output with working fewer hours?
I would say it depends of the individual and how, I would say, competent you are with your time management. I think that we've given a lot of flexibility to people to say no to certain meetings if there's no agenda, if there's no action items that come out of it. So people who are maybe less challenging might have to catch up with certain hours. For example, we've seen a lot of meetings that have been actually, I like the remove at the yearly basis, but we've seen a lot of people say, hey, I don't think I bring value to this meeting, so I'm hopping off. And so it comes to re-question actually all the people who are on that meeting, but those individuals, I don't see them working more hours. And then I think it depends on the seasonality of our business and what's going on in terms of crunch or not.
I would say at thredUP, yes. People do generally, I like to say, like, it is not a 32-hour work week. It's a 4-day work week. So like I would say you're hard pressed to find somebody that's not putting in 9 to 10 hours during those 4 days most of the time. There are exceptions to that, but I want to be honest with people that this is not going to be like 32 hours most likely. You are going to sprint for those 4 days, and you'll have the proper recovery after.
Yeah, it's not a check-in, check-out. They're really dedicated to what they're trying to achieve and making sure we're focused on those goals. How do you make sure people still build relationships and socially enjoy their time at work when there's less time to interact?
That's a great question because this is something we had a lot of comments when we first initially launched it. People were saying, hey, we don't have time to have that coffee chat. We don't have time to connect before meetings because our meetings are like bam, bam, bam. So what we do on a monthly basis, we have a lot of more virtual world where we have Slack channels going on, but on a monthly basis, we do make sure that we have those like little get-togethers in person at the office, or we do virtual get-togethers. So it's not so much on a day-to-day or weekly basis, maybe like we had before. So we're mostly about when we do set time, it's very intentional time to have fun and socialize, while we still believe in having fun at work.
I think it's a great question. We also have been really intentional about how we get people together. So we're in the office 3 days a week. And we have certain things like once a month we always do like a catered lunch in the kitchen. So people come in and they eat. You can't take it back to your desk. You got to come in and like eat it in the kitchen. We also do something on the other 3 weeks called the Chat and Chew program, which is that you can go and eat at any locally owned restaurant. We have gift cards to all the locally owned restaurants around our headquarters in Oakland, but you have to go with somebody. And so it's like a way to support the local community, but also build those connections and interactions between people.
Yeah, you've got to think about those different benefits, perks, things that you're doing to really force people and make the time. I love that intentionality. What pay practices what are your pay practices compared to market? Can you share about your guiding philosophy?
So my philosophy around pay is that I want to pay people what they are worth. So in our company, if we do 2 compensation cycles a year, and my thinking is always if you were going to leave and go work somewhere else, we should be paying you whatever you would get if you were to go somewhere else. Because I don't want you to come to me and be like, I'm leaving because I got 10K more, 15K more. We should have just paid you if that's the going market. So we actually haven't changed our practices around that. We don't pay less because of this. We pay for the talent that's out there, but the bar is high. The expectation is that you're delivering at that rate as well.
Yeah, we pay market salaries as well. We're a small business, so we're comparing ourselves to smaller businesses that are similar to us. So we haven't changed much, but what we've seen is that we gain our top talent in different companies. We have people coming from larger organizations willing to kind of put that sprint. And I think that having people who have that mindset of being very ambitious and driving the work forward for the good of the business also attracts and great referrals. And I think that that's something that we've seen a lot from not necessarily having to increase our salaries on top tier market.
Do you think AI is going to accelerate more companies exploring this?
I hope so. I think AI, so not sure about you, but when we started doing the pilot period, I don't even think we were using ChatGPT at the time. But I think that what we saw is now today, we are investing so much more in tech to help us actually get more work done than what we were doing 3 years ago. And I think the philosophy of the 4-day work week of working smart, not hard, has really accelerated our willingness to test new things, to make errors, and it's okay to kind of figure out those solutions together. But I do really hope that it will bring some companies to think differently of how we approach work.
Yeah, I hope so too. I think it's for me, it's not just the advancements of AI, but it's just also I hope that companies think about the human connection element that's coming from the use of AI, and what are the things that people are going to crave differently now because you're able to use your time differently. And so I think every company should be thinking about what are the ways in which what are the things they're going to get their employees fired up and get them excited to come to work at your company, and what are things that they care about that you may not even realize matter to them.
One thing, if I can add, the Monday blues or the Monday dread, since we've done the 4-day working, I have not sensed that at all. And I think that that's something that kind of is very untangible, but tangible at the same time. The energy that shows up when on that Monday is pretty wild to see.
How do you work with partner companies or customers who don't have a 4-day work week?
Our business is our customers are shopping all the time and often on the weekends. So that's part of why we knew we were not going to be able to be as rigid with a Monday through Thursday schedule in our distribution centers, but you can still introduce a 4-day work week and have varying schedules to do that. So I think that's been super important. And then I think when it comes to other partners that our corporate team is working with, I think we will do our best to try to schedule those things during the days that our teams are working. So if a meeting on a Friday is unavoidable, we always say it's a default 4-day work or default Fridays off. There might be times where you have to put in some time on a Friday. Shouldn't be the norm, but it's something you need to do occasionally, and that the customer interactions come into that, or company partner interactions come into that. But then I think we also just would schedule just like we do with anybody else, which is we try to skew heavier on the days that we're taking meetings.
Yeah, very same. It's the same. You use your judgment and your time management to accomplish what you need to accomplish, and if there's overlap, then there is overlap.
How does a 32-hour week impact compliance with rules tied to a 40-hour standard like immigration, overtime, and union agreements?
Ooh, great question. So I would say offer in Canada, it's pretty flexible while you're under that 40-hour work week. So maybe I'll let Natalie talk a bit more about the US, but what we've seen in France, for example, is that we've had to actually base our contracts as regular contracts because it doesn't exist while the legislation is a bit more rigid over there. So we've actually just given contracts in similar conditions and say, hey, this is like your day. You do what you want to do on that Friday, for example. So we've kind of found ways to work around it, but I can definitely say that we're not there yet in terms of compliance.
And it's not communicated as a 32-hour work week, like I mentioned before. So for us, it's a 4-day work week, but most people are working 40 hours or more that are exempt employees. For the non-exempt employees, hourly workforce, nobody works 32. They would either work 4 10s or they would work 3 12s. So then they're 36 hours. They're still eligible for benefits. But overtime would kick in over 40. So they would put in, if they wanted to work more, they'd have to get to the first 4 hours in excess before they would get overtime pay.
Thanks. How can you get executive buy-in to implement a 4-day work week without compromising business performance?
I love this. Well, I think that, my exec team was definitely met with resistance when I came to them. And I was a little bit ballsy in some of my responses to them where I was saying, well, maybe you think we can't do it because we're not efficient enough today. And so I think that, having those conversations about why you think we can't do it, why do you think we can't accomplish it, but having a backed up solid plan as to what are we actually measuring and what does performance actually mean? And what does success look if we actually explore something like that? So it comes a lot about talking the same definition of what business performance is.
For me, it wasn't that difficult to get their buy-in, I think because we had done that exercise up front where we had talked about the things that we appreciated during COVID and the things that we missed. And so when I went back to them, I was like, this is something I think we should try based on everything you all told me. Then they're like, oh, it makes sense. But then there was certainly the fear of like, how is that going to work? Like, what about this? What about that? And so we really just spent a bunch of time like talking through all of those things and then really shaping the policy based on input from the entire executive team. And they still are, like, they're all like huge advocates for this and it has changed their lives as well.
It's so interesting because I feel like, like the 5-day work week is a concept someone came up with at some point in time. So it's like really breaking down, like, hold on, why are we ingrained to think that this is how it is meant to be, like, normal, right?
Right, exactly.
And we talked about it a little bit before, but we know that Fridays are not that productive, right? So we need to also like make sure that you're measuring actually that output. And I think that when we do that 4-day work week, it is a rush. Like, we don't have people checking out at 3 o'clock on our Thursday. There's deliverables that we need to account for. But we also all know the reality of what that Friday afternoon looks like.
Right.
We've got a minute left, so let's do one last question. Did some teams not want to implement the 4-day work week? And if so, was it an all or nothing implementation or all teams or no teams? Like, what was your approach?
We had a lot of excitement. I think everybody, for the most part, was like really excited. There was a little bit of fear of like, what is this going to look like? But I think we dispelled that through some of the roundtables and the trainings that we did. We did all teams. To me, it was like it was only going to work if we all rallied around this. Because in other cases where I've heard it didn't work is where like certain teams were doing it, but other teams weren't doing it. So the people that were on a 4-day work week were hearing from people that weren't. Like, it had to sort of be like, we're in this together. And if it doesn't work, we'll reverse together.
Yeah, it was definitely an all teams situation for us as well. I think it's very exciting. And then I think a lot of the fear at first was like, well, I don't even see, sometimes I can't get my work done in 5 days. How do you expect me to do the work in 4 days? And so it's breaking that out step by step that really made the difference.
Ariane, Natalie, thank you for sharing such incredible insights with everybody here, answering so many questions. You're both so knowledgeable about this, and I love it. I love the exploration, and I just appreciate you coming and chatting with all of us here. Thanks, everyone.
Thank you.